Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to EU Untangled, the podcast where we unravel EU politics and policies. My name is Victor Aguilar, and Alex Roth is here with me. You want to say hi, Alex?
Hello.
So we're very happy to be back after a long winter break that lasted more than a winter. And hopefully this time around we'll be able to be a bit more often with you guys. Today, we're going to be talking about how to land yourself a job in the European Union. Now, just a disclaimer here. The fact that you listen to this podcast does not mean that you'll be able to land yourself a job in the EU. What we're going to do is try to explain what it means to work in the EU, how you can find the right information in order to know how to apply for a job within one of the European Union institutions, and what to do next. And for that, we have an amazing guest with us today. Her name is Chiara Bellani, and she comes from Italy. She's been in Brussels for a while, and I let her introduce herself. But before that, just a quick remark. Chiara is joining and speaking with us in a personal capacity, not on behalf of the European Commission. This means that nothing of what she says can represent or reflect the official opinion or views of the European Commission. Chiara, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Victor. Hello, everyone. Hi, Alex. Thank you so much for the invitation today. It is really a pleasure for me. And the reason why I actually accepted this invitation is because I would have loved to have a podcast or listen or read anything of the sort when I was trying to get a job in the institutions. So very happy to try to untangle a little bit the maze of landing a job in the EU institutions. My name is Chiara from Italy, as Victor said, and I've been in Brussels for over 9 years. I work in the European Commission. I've been working there for almost 6 years in different roles. And during the episode, I will try to explain you a little bit how you can get in, how you can move, which kind of jobs are available, which kind of skills you need, and a little bit more around this topic.
That's great. We can't wait to get started. And maybe just to try to understand a little bit where you're coming from, can you tell us why you chose to do a career in the European institutions? Why a European career? You come from Italy. You could have stayed in Italy. You could have also gone anywhere else in the EU and, okay, of course, anywhere else in the world. But you chose to come to Brussels, which could not be a more radically different weather than the one that you have in beautiful Rome, where you're from.
That's very true. However, I did study political science and international relations during my bachelor, and then during my master, I studied European studies. Therefore, it was quite a channel, let's say, already defined for me. I really wanted to contribute to the European Union, work for the EU, and try to contribute to this mission that I really believe in. The reason why I decided to come to Brussels, at least to try and see how a European job would be, is because I did take part to a couple of Erasmus projects. So the first one was the most classic ones. So the exchange between two universities in Europe, where you spend 6 months or more abroad. And that was, for me, really eye-opening. It really changed my life, even if it sounds a little cliche. I spent 6 months in Oslo, and that for me was a bit an opening to what the EU could be and beyond, to be honest, because Norway is actually outside of the EU. So I said, okay, this is really a type of lifestyle I would like. I like to exchange with people coming from different cultures, different languages, different countries. So let's see if the international career would be something for me. Therefore, I continued with this, and during my master, I did the same, but in Canada. In Vancouver, where I studied for a while at the University of British Columbia, and there I was exposed even more to the international environment beyond the EU. So, but that was a bit too far for me. So I said, okay, I think Brussels is a good compromise. So I think I can.
Right. Between Italy and Canada, Brussels sounds like some
fair.
kind of middle ground.
Exactly. So I did my thesis on my master thesis on the role of the EU in the international negotiations. And I decided to pursue this career. And that's where I am right now after 9 years.
Wow.
Still here.
And you are not alone. Around 60,000 people work in the European institutions from 27 member states and beyond even.
Yeah.
So that's quite an impressive number. And especially if you think about the kind of work that they do in this sort of humongous international administration. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that EU staff does?
Sure. So there are different kinds of EU jobs, as you can imagine, because we have, first of all, different kinds of institutions. So if we want to generalize a bit, so using the main institutions, meaning the biggest institutions like the Commission, the European Commission and the European Parliament, the kind of job that the EU staff does is definitely administrative, but it can really be very wide, from communication to IT, to science, to audit, external relations, economics, finance, law, languages, HR. There is a lot of different types of job and different levels also.
Sounds like there is a job for almost any kind of professional out there. I've even heard of the so-called lawyer linguists, which in a world of Pokemons, they will be the hardest Pokemon to catch, right? I
guess so. And indeed, there are some competitions for lawyer linguists, which are lawyers who also have a linguistic expertise. And
very rare.
Yeah, very rare. So when the competitions are on and you're eligible, there is you're lucky, let's say.
So we're talking here about how to find a job in the European institutions, but of course the European institutions are very big. There is not just one single building and there is not just one single organization. The better known ones are the European Commission and the European Parliament, but there is also the European Council, and there is countless, well, not countless actually, you can count them.
Almost countless.
But it feels like this very big universe of institutions that includes the European Court of Auditors, agencies, the European Economic and Social Committee, the Committee of the Regions, the European External Action Service, a number of bodies. And each of these institutions requires different profiles, different kinds of, specialists. When you think about the work that the European Union does on so many different fields, the policies that it has to put together, it really needs to attract talent. Can you tell us a little bit about the kind of benefits that working in the EU brings to you as a professional, and why you should come and work in one of these places?
Absolutely. So first of all, I think that the content, the type of job that the EU institutions do is extremely interesting. If you are interested almost in anything, the institutions work from from education, to research, to competition, and so many more. But this is not only content related. Working in the EU is also very attractive for other reasons. Of course, we cannot deny that there is a competitive salary. The salary is definitely something that may attract people to come to Brussels, but this is not the only thing. So the content, the salary is important, but the Commission also, I mentioned the Commission because that's where I work, so I can give a bit more like a personal experience, but I know that also the other institutions are very much involved in trying to help the staff, for example, having a good work-life balance, trying to have family benefits. European schools are available to the staff. There are plenty of training opportunities given for free to the staff. You can have free language courses in any of the 24 languages. So it is true, you move to Brussels, which can be quite challenging if you come from Rome, for example. But to be honest, there are a lot of opportunities that are given to the EU staff. And you were mentioning correctly that there are a lot of people working for the institutions. But the Commission is by far the biggest. So only in the Commission, we are 32,000 people. And that's like a massive number if you think about it. I come from a town of 20,000 people, so close to Rome. So that's quite impressive.
Although if you think about that, the 60,000 people are working for 400 million people, maybe it is not that much after all.
That's a great point. 400 million Europeans.
Yeah,
more than 400 million. I just wanted maybe to add a little point. You mentioned before Brussels, and we also had been talking about different institutions. I think what most of us refer to the EU often means Brussels, because indeed most of the staff of the European Commission, of the European Parliament, and of the European Council, and also not countless, but some other institutions are there. But there is obviously Strasbourg and Luxembourg as well, with main seats of these main institutions. But then, as we said before, you might also be working for the European Union in Warsaw, or in Sevilla, or in Ispra, Italy, or in other places, because you might be working for either a delegation, or you might also be working for a so-called decentralized agency, or you might be working in Frankfurt for the European Central Bank. So I just wanted to make the point that there are a lot of people working everywhere in Europe, but by far the most in Brussels. So, maybe if the weather is not, you're not like the Brussels weather, well, maybe you have to look for a researcher job in Sevilla for the Joint Research Center, for example.
Actually, maybe could be interesting for our listeners to mention a couple of numbers, because we said that the Commission is indeed 32,000 people, and comparing to the Parliament is much more, because the Parliament has only around 8,000 people, and 5,000 of these are in Brussels, as you correctly said before. The rest are all spread also in Strasbourg. The council has 3,000 people. The Court of Justice, 2,000 people. But what's, I think, find more interesting is about the Commission staff. And I mention again the Commission also because the Commission is the one that published more recent data from 2022. So that's really recent. So in the Commission staff, which we said 32,000 people, out of these, 21,000 people are in Belgium. So that's indeed quite a lot. And 3,000 in Luxembourg, 3,000 in the delegations around the world, and 1,600 in Italy. Indeed.
Wow, those are some impressive numbers. And I'm really glad that you also mentioned the rest of the world beyond the European Union's borders, because the European Union has also representations in other parts of the world. So it's true that your job can take you to some pretty interesting places.
Absolutely. If you work in external affairs, it's really like a diplomat job.
I guess this is a good moment to talk a little bit about the different kinds of staff categories. Can you tell us a little bit more about how this is structured and what's what?
Sure. So there are indeed several kinds of different staff categories. There are a couple that are completely external. So those are called interim and intramuros. So the interim contracts are external contract that one can get through an external agency. And these are really temporary contract that can last only up to 6 months. So those are normally taken for maternity leaves or for short task, let's say like a task force or an event organization. So this kind of temporary activities.
And to just understand, when you work as an interim, you are not working directly for the institution. I mean, you might be working for the European Commission, but you're not employed by the European Commission.
Yeah, that's what I mean with interim and intramuros. Okay. These are external. So you're not EU staff, but you work physically in the institutions.
So the 32,000 people that we cited before,
do not include those.
Okay, thanks.
So the interim is like the 6 months, and then the intramuros is basically the same thing. So you're hired by a consultancy, which has the Commission, for example, as a client. So you can work for the Commission, but you're not paid by the Commission. You're paid by the consultancy.
And what kind of, let's say, work do these consultants do? To me, it sounds like the Commission has a lot of work in their hands, and then suddenly they need a couple of extra hands on deck. And then they can resort to these external contractors and ask them to hire people either temporarily as an interim for a period of up to 6 months, or maybe as a kind of intramuros or a consultant that could be there for longer, but is paid for by an external party.
Yeah, the intramuros are mostly two types of work, which is IT or communication. So for communication needs or for IT needs, the Commission, and again, I say the Commission, but other institutions do the same, rely on the expertise of these consultancies, which are maybe communication consultancies. So they have that kind of expertise.
Right.
So you can be an intramuros and work for years in the European Commission without actually being paid by the Commission, but being paid by the consultancy and being physically in the office, in the premises of the institution. So,
and maybe is it also then true that you are, since you're not paid by the European Commission, that you also have a different kind of contract, I would assume.
Absolutely. You have a Belgian contract.
Exactly. So you're basically a regular, quote unquote, employee by a regular, quote unquote, Belgian company, in contrast to the officials we're going to talk about in a second, which have a different kind of contract.
That's correct.
And here we say Belgian contract, assuming that they're based in Belgium,
of
but
course.
it could also be an Italian contract if they're in Ispra, or a Spanish contract if they're in Seville,
Yes.
or basically a local kind of contract.
That's correct. Yes, a local contract.
Very good. Okay, so these are the external positions.
Yes.
What about the others?
Then it gets complicated, let's say. So if you want to land a job in the EU, you should listen very carefully right now. So there is definitely one way to get in, which is the traineeship. So the Blue Book traineeship, it's also how I got in. And it is, I would say, how a lot of my colleagues also had the opportunity to stay. The Blue Book traineeship is a commission traineeship. The other institutions also have their own traineeship channel. And this is a paid traineeship that allow you to spend 5 months in the institutions and learn the kind of job that the institutions do. Mm-hmm. It is a very competitive process. It takes place twice a year, and you need to have a strong CV because the number of applications is really, really high. So this is definitely one category. Then if you are lucky enough to enter the institutions with the traineeship, then maybe you could have the chance to actually land a more stable contract.
Right, because doing a traineeship doesn't mean that you will stay in one of the European institutions, just that you have these 5 months to sort of experience the way that the European Union works, but then it's sort of goodbye, unless you're lucky enough to get an additional job.
And actually, the three of us, we have actually quite a nice selection of follow-up careers, because all of us did a Blue Book traineeship. I myself did not stay on, so after 5 months I left the commission. Victor and Chiara, though, you both actually stayed on, but in different roles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with different kinds of contracts.
Exactly.
So at the beginning, I believe we were both interims, which we talked about before, but then Chiara managed to get a contract agent position, which we will explain in a moment. And I stayed on as an interim for a little longer. When the special event that I was helping with ended, then my contract ended as well. And then I had to move elsewhere. Now I don't work in the Commission. Now I work in the European Parliament, which is also a different kind of job. But it's true, our Blue Book traineeship led us down different paths.
Yeah. So that's definitely a way I would consider if I would wish to work in the institutions. That's definitely the first step. So you correctly mentioned the contract agent, and that's indeed true. After my traineeship, I landed a contract agent position. So what are these contract agents? Contract agents are EU staff with a contract of up to 6 years. In exceptional cases, it can be a bit longer, maybe 7, maybe 8, but it is very rare. So let's say contract agents can stay in the institutions for up to 6 years. There are 4 levels of contract agents: 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 is the most basic, let's say, level, and 4 is the most experienced.
And this
level.
is what they call function groups, or FG, which is part of my favorite EU slang, because everybody in Brussels talks about like, ooh, I know someone who got an FG3 contract. And this is exactly what it means. It means that they were offered a position as a contract agent somewhere in the European institutions in the function group 3, which I guess speaks to the kind of tasks and the kind of salary that they will perceive.
Exactly. The contract agent FG1, so function group 1, its salary would be the lowest. 4 would be the highest. So that's how it goes. Also, for every function group, you also have steps. So you have function group 2, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you can go to the next. So it is quite complicated. But what changes at the end, it's mostly the salary. So, of course, I'm speaking here not on behalf of the institution. I'm speaking for my experience. And you can definitely have a similar job between function group 3, function group 4, or even function group 2. So that sometimes is only due to the budget available of the DG, of the unit, or the institution itself.
Right. So in practice, you may end up doing the same kind of job, but in theory, these positions should be sort of different, and I guess that's why they're rewarded differently.
Yes.
So these are the contract agents. It's funny that they're called contract agent because I assume that every single person who works in the European institutions has a contract, right? So I've always found it funny how they come up with these names: interim, intramuros, contract agent. What's next?
So we didn't discuss how to get a contract agent position, but we will discuss that later.
We'll get there.
A temporary agent is another kind of temporary contract. It is actually very similar to a contract agent. It also lasts only up to 6 years. But it is a bit a higher step because it basically is at the same level of an EU official. So this temporary agent can be of two kinds: AD, meaning administrators, or AST, meaning assistant. So this AD and AST corresponds to EU officials level, meaning you are an EU official for just 6 years. A bit like it's something in between the EU official and the contract agent.
Right. So it's like an EU official in terms of tasks, responsibilities, and
Salary.
remuneration, yet temporary.
Correct.
Okay.
DG Meme called them the unicorns of the institutions.
Yeah, because they're very rare.
Exactly, they're rare. They only make up around 2% of the institution staff, and only a few people had the privilege of meeting one.
Yeah. So,
Oh my, I know
rare
at least
sighting.
2.
Oh boy, you lucky girl.
Yeah, so this, I guess, leads us to the actual EU officials.
Okay, so far, the interim, intramuros, contract agent, and temporary agents are all temporary positions. The first two are recruited by external companies. The other two are recruited by the Commission, but for a limited amount of time. Now, we're getting to the real deal, the permanent staff.
Yes, the permanent staff is also divided in 2 categories. One is the AD and the other is the AST. So what I mentioned before, the AD is the administrator official. So that's the most standard EU official. There are several levels, AD 5 until AD 16. So when you enter the Commission at the lowest level as AD, you're an 85. So that's the lowest AD you can
Entry level.
Entry level. 16 is probably Ursula. I don't know.
Von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission.
Yes, exactly. I don't know about that. Another permanent is the AST, the assistants. So they have more technical secretarial jobs. And again, you have the technical AST. They go from 1 to 11 levels, and the AST/ASC are the secretary AST from 1 to 6. So that sounds all very complicated, but yes, these are the 2 big category of EU officials.
And again, I assume that as you go up these different levels that you just mentioned, then your responsibilities increase, and also your salary.
Correct.
Okay, so now that we know a little bit about the different staff categories, there comes the interesting part. How do you get there? So how do you actually manage to be appointed as a contract agent, a temporary agent, an AD official, or an AST administrator?
Sorry, Vic, I want to come here with another category of people we haven't mentioned, actually, if that's okay.
Oh, please do.
Because actually, we have missed out a few, let's say, other, and one of them is actually maybe a category that might be relevant for more people than you think. It's the seconded national expert.
Yeah.
This is a kind of position where you actually start working for a national ministry or a national organization, institution, and then they send you as a seconded national expert. The title is actually exactly what it is, to work in an EU institution. So I just wanted to mention this. Obviously, the recruitment process, it has a completely different track because you're not going to be hired by the EU institution. This is going to be very different, I guess, in different EU countries.
In this case, it's probably the ministry itself,
Absolutely.
in the member state that hires you, but then posts you to Brussels or Strasbourg or Luxembourg or wherever it is that you're going to be working.
Correct. And only for up to a few years.
Thanks for mentioning that. This actually broadens the scope of the possible positions that you can perform in the European Union, provided that you pass the necessary selection process, which Chiara, you'll tell us more about.
Sure. Again, there are several kinds of selection processes. So I quickly mentioned the Blue Book traineeship before. That's one way to be hired by the Commission for 5 months. But I think we should maybe focus more on the contract agents, temporary agents, and the permanent positions.
Right.
So the personnel office of the EU is called EPSO. And they are in charge of organizing all the competitions to hire the different categories of staff.
So they centralize it.
They centralize it. So
for all the European institutions, for all kinds of categories of staff.
That's correct. Some institutions may have other channels, so additional channels. So I don't know, the European Court of Justice, for example. But in general, yes, EPSO is is part of the Commission actually, but it is in charge of organizing all these competitions and hiring.
Especially the one from for the European Commission, while all the institutions outside Brussels, all the decentralized institutions, or you mentioned before the European Court of Auditors, the European Court of Justice, the European Central Bank, all other institutions, they might use EPSO, but often do not. So you have to check their websites.
Exactly. So EPSO organizes competitions both for the permanent positions and for the temporary positions. So the temporary positions, meaning contract agents, for example, have their own special, always open competition, so-called CAST. If you're in Brussels, you have heard this word already. So this CAST is basically an open competition aiming to establish a reserve list of candidates. This CAST, of course, goes with the different categories of the contract agents, the function group we mentioned before. So you can apply for a CAST for level function group 3, function group 4, 1, 2. 3. I mentioned 3 and 4 because those are definitely the most known, let's say, in Brussels.
And looked after.
And looked after, for sure. So the interesting fact about this competition is that it's not a competition that you can apply to and then you can just sit and see if you succeed.
What do you mean?
That's when it gets tricky. So you can apply for a CAST competition, but it is not a given you'll be called to sit it. So it's an open reserve list, let's say. They aim to establish this reserve list. So you can apply for the CAST, let's say function group 3, communication, because you also have to choose which kind of a field you're interested in.
Okay.
And then you wait. If you're lucky, they'll call you and you can sit a competition. And if you pass it, then you are in the reserve list.
All right. So I can express my interest for a CAST exam, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to be called for it.
Correct.
Okay. So what are the conditions to be called for a CAST exam? Like, what do I have to do to increase my chances? Do we know, or is it more of a black box?
That's where it gets a bit tricky. Often, if you're already working in the Commission, let's say as a Blue Book, very often your head of unit would help you, or the HR of your DG would help you to get called to the CAST. However, this is subject to the needs of each unit's DG and institution in general.
So let me just quickly recap. So you express your interest, then let's assume that you're lucky, you're called for the CAST exam, then you take it, and then you mention a reserve list. What's that?
So if you pass this exam, then you are in a reserve list that's basically open for, if I'm not mistaken, between 5 and 10 years, according to the different levels. Then this reserve list is accessible to everyone in the institutions. And then if a unit, for example, has a need, then they will go through the reserve list.
So it's like a database with the profiles of all the people that have passed this examination and that are therefore eligible.
Yes, okay. This is one way. The other way is when there is an actual vacancies in the institutions and
a real opening.
A real opening
that is available to anyone who might fit the criteria.
Exactly. Okay. So when there is an opening of this sort, like in a unit, and they ask, I don't know, we need a communication officer, then they will tell you, if you're already in the CAST reserve list, you can apply telling us your application number, so they can find you immediately. If you haven't done a cast, meaning you have not been called to a cast, then you also have the chance to sit the cast and then do the interview or apply for this position.
Okay. Because in this case, a vacancy has been published and
Exactly.
it's open to applicants.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you can also have the chance to sit the cast because you apply for a position that's right for you.
Okay.
And if the recruiter likes your profile, then they can call you for the cast for the specific post.
Now, I have two quick follow-up questions before we move any further. One, does CAST stand for Contract Agent Staff?
I don't know.
Okay, that just occurred to me. Probably it does not.
Victor, I can actually tell you what it stands for because I was Googling it while you guys were talking. I was actually had the same question. It stands for I lost it, for something with selection tool. Contract.
So you looked it up, you read it, and then you immediately forgot it.
Exactly. It stands for Contract Agents Selection Tool.
Damn it! I was close though.
Yeah, you were close. Yeah.
Okay, but it makes a lot more sense because CAST is a selection tool. It's the exam that you have to sit, the exam that you have to pass. Now, that leads me to my second question. So what is this exam about? What kind of questions do they ask?
It's a multiple choice based exam. So you sit in front of a computer and you answer questions. There are some changes going on right now, but the CAST so until now, it has different kind of set of questions, verbal, numerical, and abstract questions, and then some content related questions. As I said before, when you apply for a CAST, you don't only apply for a specific function group, but you also apply for a field.
Right.
So you could apply for FG3 communication or FG4 project management.
Okay.
The last set of questions that are content related, also called situational judgment, they are more related to the content of the CAST that you are applying to.
That makes a lot of sense because on the one hand, it means that they test your general skills or abilities to deal with numbers, with verbal reasoning, to judge abstract situations, but then they will also test your knowledge in the specific field that you want to be part of.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the procedure for a contract agent. Tell us about the temporary agent, this coveted unicornish position.
That's also very much a unicorn selection procedure, let's
God.
say. So let's say there the luck plays quite a role because a temporary agent is only offered when a vacancy is open twice and a vacancy for an official post. In case that in two times they cannot find any suitable candidate, then they are allowed to recruit a temporary agent.
Okay, so here you really have to be extra lucky so that a permanent position is not filled in 2 attempts.
Exactly.
And then a position for a temporary agent is opened and you might be the lucky one to snatch it.
Correct.
Oh God, that does sound pretty much impossible.
Yes, that really helps if you're already in a team. So I wouldn't recommend this as the way to get in the institutions.
Right. So this really sounds like temporary agents are not something that you can go for as a position, but more something that happens to you once you are somehow in the European Union.
Yeah, let's put it like that.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. So let's leave luck aside for a second and let's turn to the more official recruitment process for AD officials and AST administrators.
Yes.
So let's say that you have come to an understanding with your own self that you want to really spend the rest of your life working in the European Union, and therefore you'd love to be permanently part of it. So how do you become an AD official or an AST administrator or an AST/SC?
So to land a permanent job in the EU, there is basically only this way to go, which is succeeding a EU competition organized by EPSO. EU competitions can be happening for different kind of staff, for different kind of levels, for different kind of topics, or for everything. Let me make it clear.
What?
Yes. So The EU competitions, let's say the biggest EU competition is the so-called EU Generalist competition. This is a competition organized by EPSO, normally every year, but last year's, because of pandemic and other issues, it hasn't been organized.
We all know that the 2 years of the pandemic don't count.
Don't really count, but there is one coming up in September 23. So the Generalist competition is the biggest competition recruiting a generalist profile. So any profile is good. You basically just need some basic requirements, which are, for example, EU nationality and a degree in any field and some language requirements. And you can basically apply for a EU generalist competition.
Okay. And when you say general language requirements, I guess that means speaking a couple of EU languages.
Yes, normally it's one language needs to be English, French, or German.
Yes, which are the official working languages of the European Union.
And another EU language.
Okay.
Now, if you're a EU national, then it's your native language most of the times.
Okay.
So this sounds like a dream, but it is not, because, of course, it is very competitive.
It sounds more like the beginning of a nightmare. Tell us more.
It is very competitive because a lot of people can apply, are eligible to apply. So it is super competitive, and only a very small number of candidates will land an actual job. A very small number of candidates would actually pass all the process, the selection process. And passing a EU competition doesn't even mean that you're going to get a job automatically.
Oh, God.
Passing a EU competition means that you're going to land into a reserve list.
Oh, this sounds a lot like the CAST thing, where first of all you have to get lucky to be called for one, or to await the moment where a position opens. Then you sit this examination that sounds complex enough, and then all of that is just for you to be whacked into a database that then the commission checks here and there to select the talent that they need.
No, but to be fair, the EPSO competitions, then if you manage to enter this reserve list, then the chances you get a job are pretty high.
And to give some more numbers on that, what does it mean to have few chances? I have actually the numbers of an 85 competition from the year 2015, and the numbers EPSO provided are the following: that over 25,000 applicants booked the computer-based test. This is this first step. And then there 83% sat this test. Then we had another test, only 5%. So from all of them only came to this second level, and then only 1.4% came to the final level, the assessment center. And at the end, just 0.6% actually were the lucky ones that actually arrived on the reserve list. So this is 159 people out of 25,379. So whether you think this is a high or low number is up to you, but just to give you a perspective for this 85 which happened though in 2015. So of course things might be different in the future.
And to be fair here, I think luck plays a smaller role. It definitely plays a role because it's a competition. You don't know the other candidates, so you may be lucky being better than them, but definitely the EU competition requires a lot of preparation and work. Right. I did try the 85 generalist competition at least maybe 4 or 5 times. I'm not sure. And I'm telling you, if you just try, you don't pass. There is no chance.
What do you mean?
It's not a competition where let's try. Maybe I'm lucky. No, you need to be prepared.
Exactly. Talking about preparedness, maybe you can give us a bit more detail on at least what you experienced in terms of test, and also what are the steps to actually in the end arrive to the final reserve list.
Also, it would be interesting to know what kind of exam it is that you're taking that just so few people get through.
Now, we're talking about the generalist now, but all other competitions, the specialist competitions, are the same. The only thing that changes is the requirements. So what makes you eligible? So the generalists, you most likely are eligible. If you are EU national, you have a degree, speak English, you're eligible, let's say. But there are plenty of specialist competitions. There is an economist competitions. There is a communication competition.
Cybersecurity.
Exactly. Or very like specialists like intellectual property, security, transports.
Okay.
So in those cases, the process is the same. Maybe they offer, I don't know, 20 posts for transport specialists. But in those cases, the requirements are much more restrictive.
Then maybe there are fewer spots, but there are also fewer applicants.
Exactly.
And maybe just to add a final point here, also, if you look at the numbers again, you see also that the specialist competition have become much more important in recent years. So we have here numbers from 2018, and it's almost 60% of the staff needs were actually run by specialists, and the generalists that had been the majority of competition is actually in decline. Also, if you look from the history, these big generalist competitions were actually organized in several waves, especially when the European Union were enlarged quite a bit in 2004 and also in a couple of years afterwards, because they just needed just people, in general people. And then now it seems to be more and more the case that they have a lot of people, but now they are certain skills that are needed. So I think that
now they need professionals.
That is reflected by the increased need or the increased hire from specialist competition, which, to be fair, sometimes have more lucrative success rates than 0.6%. Doesn't mean that it's 100%, obviously, but it can be higher.
Right. And here we're still talking about administrators, AD.
Or AST.
Oh, so the process is the same also for assistants?
Yes.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about what the examination entails and how you can prepare for it?
So, funny enough, it is exactly the same as the CAST. It's just more difficult. So it is also a multiple-based computer test.
And it's more difficult because?
You may have more questions, less time. The questions are just more difficult.
Okay.
The idea is the same. So you have multiple choices. So you're sitting multiple choice question tests, and you have a verbal, you have a numerical, and you have an abstract part. You have, for example, for the abstract part, which is those kind of questions with little figures, and you have to guess which figure goes next to keep the pattern. You have 1 minute per question, for example, and you have maybe 20 questions of those. Now, this is the pattern the style that EPSO had so far. So these multiple choice questions. However, it's important to say that EPSO is currently revising the selection procedure. So all this information about the actual type of questions may not be valid any longer in the next competition. So that's a disclaimer to be done.
Right. Now, I have one more question, though. I suppose that there is some kind of nationality quotas that the European Union keeps an eye out on as well to ensure that even the smallest EU countries are represented or have a place in each of these competitions with some successful applicants.
Yeah. So that happens, but I cannot give you the details because I don't work for EPSO. But meaning passing a competition, meaning ending up in the reserve list, doesn't mean being hired. So the reserve list is probably very wide and you have all kinds of nationality. Okay. But then at the moment of hiring, maybe those quotas are taken into account.
That's a very interesting insight. So nationality might play a role perhaps at that stage. Where once you are in the reserve list, maybe how fast they hire you or for which kind of positions, that's where being a national of one or another EU member state might play a role.
Exactly. Okay. And gender as well. The Commission is quite cautious in keeping the gender balance in the EU, among the EU staff. Actually, in 2022, the Commission released this data that 56.8% of the EU staff is female. So that's actually quite interesting, and 43.2% is male. So this kind of quota play a role, but depends really later on. Something that I wanted to add before when I talked about the multiple choice questions for the AD or AST competition, so the permanent, this is just the first step. Passing that doesn't even mean you pass to the next step, because it can happen that too many people pass it, and then there are not enough posts. Therefore, they just select the best among those that pass the first step. After that, you have case studies, you have assessment centers, you have interviews, and that's only to mention. Let's say, let's not go too much into details there, but that these are all the steps that you have to go through if you want to pass a competition and end up on the reserve list.
And it is especially these further steps that are currently, according to the EPSO website at least, are currently updated. So while the first step will still be in multiple choice procedure, especially the steps after are going to be revamped, and you won't have any more this assessment centers. But I mean, even if they do change the system, I don't think we have to be naive here and now believe everybody can land an easy job as an AD. I think it's still going to be a quite tough procedure.
So several layers, lots of different options, not so many places. What would be 3 pieces of advice that you could give to our listeners out there who might be tempted by the possibility of working in the European Union?
Yeah, so for sure, being resilient, keep trying. The chances are not very high, so it doesn't mean that you're not valuable or that you're not going to be successful. So if you try a competition, doesn't go well, try again. So that's for sure my biggest piece of advice. Keep trying. Second is being open-minded when it comes maybe to the kinds of job you want to do. So the EU has so much to offer, and being maybe narrow-minded in terms of the specificity of the job you like or the content or the topic maybe doesn't help you. So I would say keep an open mind. Maybe you have a project management background, but you get offered a policy job, then consider it. May be more interesting than you were thinking. And then, of course, prepare yourself. So master the languages. There is no way you're going to land a job if you don't speak excellent English and your native language at least. And of course, experience, trainings, academic background, everything you can build that can build up your CV. Just invest on that for sure.
Okay, so resilience, open-mindedness, preparedness. Yeah. That's the recipe for success.
I think.
Thank you very much, Chiara.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot. I just like to mention we're gonna for sure post some links in our show notes. You will find those if you while you listen to your this podcast in your podcast app. Some links to EPSO and some maybe other interesting pieces. If you like this episode, or if you didn't like it, or if you just want to give us feedback, we would be very happy about it. You can send us an email. You can also reach us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram with EU.untangled or EU_untangled on Twitter. By the way, website, we have a new one, untangled-podcast.eu, with a fresh design, and I hope you like it. So check that out. And I can only recommend you to listen to some of our old episodes. For example, we discussed in our last episode the DSA, the DMA, and the Data Act. So if you don't know what these acronyms stand for, check it out. This is our last episode. And before that, we discussed actually how people talk in Brussels, the Brussels jargon. So this might also be a good...
Very important for your examinations.
Exactly. A very important, very interesting...
no kidding, it's true.
It is also maybe a helpful episode in preparing you what comes once you arrive in Brussels, in order to understand the people in the policy bubble. And if you have the chance on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to give us a star, or maybe 5, that would be also very much appreciated.
Actually, you have the chance, so just go ahead and do it.
Exactly. Thanks.
And before we go, let's do just a quick fact-checking. When discussing the recruitment of contract agents, Chiara mentioned that the CAS selection procedure includes a situational judgment section. However, the CAS does not include any situational judgment section, only verbal, numerical, and abstract reasoning tests. It also includes tests to assess your ability to process information quickly, and tests to evaluate your prioritizing and organizing skills. The CAST also includes a section to evaluate specific competences for certain profiles, such as translators, finance experts, project managers, lawyers, or ICT professionals, you name it. On the other hand, the EPSA competition for administrators, AD, and assistants, AST, does include a situational judgment test. This is meant to assess how an applicant typically behaves in a working context by presenting them with situations that they could experience at work that involve skills such as collaboration, teamwork, leadership, and coordination. Later in the show, Alex mentions that temporary agents make up around 2% of the EU staff. Actually, according to the HR key figures that the European Commission released in early 2022, temporary staff in an administrator position represent 3.5% of the European Commission's workforce, so a bit more than what Alex mentioned before. It's important to mention that this figure does not take into account other EU institutions or other categories of temporary agents in assistant positions. As a fun fact, staff under national law, meaning seconded national experts, are even rarer to find in the EU. Only 1.7% of the European Commission's staff fall under this category. Temporary agents, worry not. You're still special to us.